So I think y'all missed me last week, right? Yeah, okay. Sure you did. Everybody else did too. And they'll miss me this week. And he was talking about how God does certain things, and I was sharing, because a lot of times you never really want to drop on a Sunday morning and call somebody up and say, hey, by the way, I'm not going to be there. Will you take the sermon? And it's like, oh yeah, I've got a whole repertoire of them I can just pull from real quick, right? And I was sharing with someone that Michael and I were going to tag team last week. And so I said, here, I'm going to send you the whole sermon. And then I'll highlight your part. So that when I called him on Sunday morning, or I texted him on Sunday morning and said, hey, I'm sorry I can't be there, because my wife was really hurting and stuff. It was easy because he had already had it. So it's awesome how God works things out. So we continue with the grace card. And we're going to talk this morning about grace lessons, okay? And sometimes I was told that I should never ever do this. You should never ever open your life up in front of a congregation and never use yourself as an illustration in the sermons. And no, I can't do that. And so, if you ever talk to my daughter, Charlie, and she'll share, I think she's even shared a couple times, that the only time that she ever really saw Diana and I really get into a heated discussion was over money, okay? But there was one other time. It was right after the year 2000. In the year 2000, for those of us that were working in IT, the world was coming to an end. Everything was going to cease because they didn't know how to deal with the year 2000 with computers. Because when they did certain things, the disk was so expensive, and so what you did was you basically converted the year down to a 2-digit number instead of a 4-digit number to store it. And so you had a lot of code and a lot of programs that basically said this: if the year was 1960 and below, and so what they would do is they would strip off the 19. And so they would say, if the year is 60 and below, then what you need to do is put a 19 in front of it or something, It was really crazy, because what was going to happen was, as soon as it rolled over to the year 1900 or year 2000, it was going to store everything as 1900. And it was going to go back and rebuild everything. And so you have things like, for instance, you had insurance policies that were going to expire in the year 2015. It was never going to get there. You were going to be paying and all these things. They were just going to continue to go on and on and on. So a lot of us were making a lot of money during that period of time because companies were paying left and right, man, because they had thousands and thousands and millions of lines of code that needed changed and needed to be tested. And so they were hiring everybody they could. They couldn't get enough people in the market. So they were having to go over to India and other places to bring people in to do the work, because there was not enough Americans that could do the work that was there. And we were having, in the company I was working for, not only were we having to deal with that, we were having to do a conversion completely from one language to another. Because the company I worked for actually was John Morrell, who used to be owned by Chiquita. And they had been sold to Smithfield Foods in Virginia, and they were told that they had to get off of Chiquita's mainframe by the year 1999. So we were converting everything over and doing everything, making a lot of money and everything. And then after the year 2000, I got a job, and I stayed with them for a little while. And then all of a sudden, everything kind of went south. The market was flooded with people. I couldn't get a job anywhere. There was nobody out there that was hiring. I was running out of unemployment. And I'm sending resumes to every place I could go and every place that I could do. And Diana says, hey, you got to do something. You can't just sit at home and draw money. Because if that's the way you think you're going to do, I'm out of here. I'm gone. I will not let you do that. You're not going to sponge off of me. Okay? So, okay, what do you do? So I thought, okay, maybe it's time to change careers. So I decided that what I was going to do was I was going to go into the health field. So I was going to go in as a nurse's aide, is what I was going to do. So I went to Preble County, to their vocation up there, and I couldn't get into school. We're sitting in the car, Charlie's in the back, and she is just screaming. Not Charlie, but Diane and I, and it's very vocal. And we're arguing. And I mean, we're arguing. Well, it wasn't long, I got into Butler Tech. I went through their school, went all the way through their school, and I got a job at Christ Hospital. I was pastoring. And I was going to be working the weekends in a new wing that they were building, a telemetry wing for heart patients. I was going to be working midnights. 7 o'clock at night, Friday night and Saturday night, till 7 o'clock in the morning, and then I was going to go pastor on Sunday morning. I'm sitting there in the 2 weeks of classes, and in my second week of the class, I had finished, and I was going to work that weekend at Christ Hospital, and I get a phone call. Hey, we got a job opening for you on Monday. Can you do it? Yes, I can. And then I got back into the field. And everything worked out fine. But let me tell you something. Up to that point in time, everything wasn't fine. And it was only by God's grace, and a lesson that I learned is that sometimes you need to understand you've got to wait and wait for Him. Because sometimes we get ahead of God. And because why? You see, we had gotten ourselves into that situation of needing that money. It was living paycheck to paycheck. Even though we were making good money, we were spending good money. We had to learn how to live within our means again. And trust me, a lesson well learned. And lessons that you never forget about God's grace. Because I shared with you, it wasn't long after that, I've shared with you that I got a job getting paid very good money, trying to pay down everything, doing everything, and then all of a sudden we end up buying a house because the house we were living in had some issues with it, and so we're finding this house, and then all of a sudden we buy the house, and then all of a sudden it was like, how are you going to pay for all of this? What are you going to do? And I learned, never get ahead of God. Because from that lesson, I learned how to get through the next lesson of depending on God. And for 18 months, basically almost going through that period of time, never had one bill late, Never had a lot of money, but I never had a late bill. And everything came on time. And God knew what he was doing. And I think that you would probably, if you were honest, that you would agree that no matter who you are, that in this life, problems and trials are inevitable. They are going to come. Because I believe if I could ask any of you to stand up, if any of you have a problem-free life, I didn't think so, because I would have to say you're lying to me. Because you're still here, and in this life, we're all going to have these problems, and they are going to exist. Now what happens is, what God is looking for is, what do you do with these problems? They're coming, and they're going to hit you no matter who you are. And may I say this to you? You've only got two options in every problem. There is no door number one, door number two, or door number three. There are two options. When the problems come, you're either going to let those problems help build your character, or you're going to let that problem defeat you. Those are the only two options. You say, well, I'll just sit back and relax and it'll just, I'll just let it be. Yeah, that's a good character builder. Let it be. Let it be. Just let it be. Because it may be a good song, but it's not a good attitude. Because when the problems come, you've got to look to see what is God trying to do with your character. Because when you get through that problem in building your character, ladies and gentlemen, it's because you're going to have something coming right behind there. And you're going to need that character building to get through that one. Because if all you're doing is letting it be, letting it be, letting it be, it's defeating you. Because they're just going to keep coming and keep coming and keep coming. Now, when you look at your issues and at your problems, if you think that you can handle them by yourself, then what you're saying is, God, I don't need you. I don't know about y'all, but I haven't found a problem yet that I don't need God for. Even some of the little ones. I still got to say, hey, what are you trying to do here? What kind of character building are we doing? So, I think if I was to take and just go out on the limb a little bit, I don't think it's going to break. If I was to say that I think that everybody in this congregation has probably had some major conflict or problem in their life. Amen? Every one of us. And we will learn that it's difficult if we resist growing. Did you ever meet a kid? 35 years old and still living at home? And mom and dad are saying, when are you going to get out and get on your own? Well, I'm learning. What are you learning? May I say what they're learning? They're learning what it's going to feel like when their kids are 35 living at home in their house. And you know what I venture to say is most of those kids that are 35 that are living at home with mom and dad, when their kids hit 35, they're going to say, hit the road, Jack. You need to get out of here. And then They're going to find out, is that the lesson that you learned? No. You learned that no matter what, mom and dad still love you. And even though sometimes they would have to suffer and improvise, they're not going to kick you out on the street because they love you too much and they care. But you see, the moment, and honest, can I say this to you? For those of you that have 35-year-olds that are still living at home, turn it over to God and let Him handle it. He's got some really neat stuff that he can really work with, you know, and helping them to do this. So let me say this to you, that in order to learn how to get through the lessons in life, God sends us everyone a teacher. And the teacher may be in the form of the Holy Spirit Himself, or it may be another brother or sister in the Lord, or it may be someone else that God's going to use to come through your path to help teach us the lessons that are there. Now, have you ever had somebody that comes across your path and you're going through a problem and they just seem to be like holy sandpaper? Like, I don't need to hear this, but you do. I know it, but I don't need you to tell me. And it's like there's that rub with everything they're saying or everything they're not saying, or they give you the look and you know they're right. And every time you see that, it's just like this sandpaper. It's just rubbing and rubbing and rubbing. And do you understand that what it is called holy sandpaper? It's called God molding you and making you into what He wants us to be in those lessons. Whether it be through His Holy Spirit, through another brother and sister in Christ, or somebody that's not even a Christian. That maybe He's trying to teach us this. We were going to show a clip from the movie Grace Card, and I found out it didn't work last week and it still ain't working this week, and so I'm just going to have to summarize the clip for you, okay? I really needed the script that I could read it, and Michael and I could play the two parts, but we don't. Okay, if you remember in the very first one, there's a guy by the name of Sam. And Sam is a bivocational pastor. He's a pastor, and he's also a policeman in the movie, okay? And what's happened is Sam, the pastor, in his job as a policeman, has got a partner. And he resents this partner because this partner that he has seems to be racially prejudiced. And remember, Sam is black. And he's working with this white policeman. And he seems to Sam to be racially. So Sam senses there's a lesson in this somewhere. And with great vulnerability, what Sam does is he begins to start sharing with his congregation his feelings. And feeling of how do I partner with this person every day? When I feel like this person hates me. When I feel like this person doesn't like me, not because of the person, but because of the color of my skin. And every day I'm going to have to face this person. And every day I'm going to be wondering what's going through his mind, what's his thoughts. And he's sharing this with his congregation as to all of these things that are going on. And sometimes in James chapter 1 and verse number 2, and I'm going to read from the Phillips translation, which is a paraphrase of the scriptures. And basically, here's what it says. When all kinds of trials and temptations crowd into your lives, my brothers, don't resent them as intruders, but welcome them as friends. How hard is it when problems and issues come into our life, we look at them as, hey, why are you intruding on me? Why? It's like this. You're laying at home and someone knocks your door open. And you look there and it's somebody you don't know. It's somebody that you think's a burglar. And they're coming into your home and into your privacy, and they're bringing things that you just don't like. And you think they're an intruder. Or, what happens if you're laying there one night and all of a sudden someone breaks down the door? And you jump up, ready to knock them out or call the police. And you look, and it's your husband, your wife, your child, they forgot their keys. You thought they were an intruder. But all of a sudden you see that they're your friend. This is what James says that we ought to treat these things as. Not as intruders into our life, but rather we should treat these as friends. You know how hard that is? When we get bombarded to treat things as friends, that's a lesson, ladies and gentlemen, in grace. In understanding. You see, but what we want to do when we read James chapter 1 and verse 2, we want to say to James, James, you have no idea what I'm going through. Buddy, you ain't been there. You don't know my kids. You don't know my employer. You don't know my job. You don't know my neighbor. You don't know the shape that the world's in. You don't know. You don't know. You don't know. Yeah, he does. Yes, he does. You see, when we get hit with these problems, that are problems that we say, I can't see my way through these problems, they become critical. And sometimes we need to understand, because the verse was up there in James 1:2. Consider it great joy or pure joy, my brothers, whenever you experience various trials. It is hard to count a trial as a joy. It's like this. You ever got a splinter underneath your fingernail? Now, you get a splinter in your finger, you can tolerate that one, right? You get a splinter underneath your fingernail, you want to go to the doctor and have it chopped off. Right? Nobody, you think about it, nobody in their right mind would sit there and take a splinter and stick it underneath their fingernail. Would you? We would think that is a sadistic individual. They really need to have their head examined. Well, that's the way we feel when we're talking to James and saying, James, you have no idea. Count it a joy when we experience these trials? Are you nuts? You're telling me that when I'm going through this stuff that I'm supposed to like it? That's like getting a fingernail or a splinter underneath my fingernail. That sucker hurts. And I don't like pain. You see, I don't think any of us sit down in the morning and say, okay, God, I'm going to the doctor tomorrow. Give me the bad report. Right? I mean, it's like, okay, give me the bad report. And you get there and you're waiting for the bad report, and they don't give you the bad report. And you say, Doc, are you telling me the truth? I came here expecting a bad report, and that's what I want. We don't do that. If somebody did that, we think there's something wrong with them. They're seeing the wrong doctor. They need to go across the hall and see someone else. But Peter says, my friends, don't be surprised at the terrible trouble which now comes to test you. Do not think that something strange is happening to you. Again, what I'm trying to tell you is when things happen, ladies and gentlemen, and problems happen, you got to understand it's inevitable. You're still here. And as long as you're still here, you're still going to have issues and you're still going to have problems. You see, James tells us that here's what happens. When you go through problems, what is teaching you is endurance. I've shared with you before, there is no way that you're going to get up out of this seat today and go run a 26-mile marathon. Some of you are going to be, it's going to be difficult enough for you to get up out of the seat and walk to your car. Right? There are some of you that get up in the morning and when your feet hit the ground, it's like, oh, God, where are you? You know, do I really need to get up? Can't I just lay here and have somebody come bring everything to me today? Can't they just carry me from place to place because I know it's going to hurt? But you get up, and I know every day when I get up, I'll go home from here, and I'll go and I'll sit down, and I'll be sitting. I can be sitting for 5 minutes or 5 seconds, and when I go to stand, my feet are hurting. And they are killing me. And I go, I'm like that, the Hunchback of Notre Dame. You can, all I need is a ball and chain and you can hear me coming through the house. You know, and then after I walk for a while, the pain goes away and I'm okay. Okay? But it's when I stop, then the pain hits and I realize it. And I'm trying to say is this. The more that I walk on my feet, the less they hurt. When I stop walking on them, is when the pain comes back. It's the endurance that's trying to build, and it's the same thing with the issues and the problems that we have. God is trying to teach us lessons. Some of the problems that we have are very strong, difficult issues. And getting through those takes some time and endurance of there. But may I say something to y'all? When you begin to look at where they start talking about trouble or problems, the Greek word for problem actually means multicolored, or basically what it's saying is they come in many different shapes and sizes. Every problem is not the same. It doesn't look the same. It doesn't smell the same. It doesn't taste the same. It doesn't feel the same. It's just not there. It's not the same. Every problem is different. Every problem in your life and every problem in everybody else's life, they're all different. They're multifaceted. And when he uses that, we need to understand that what they're trying to do is trying to build character. Now, here's the problem. We need to understand that every problem can be purposeful, okay? They come to teach us something. If we read on What James says is that these problems produce in us endurance. But I need to tell you something that is very obvious, okay? And that is this. Not everything that happens in this world is God's will. I hear people all the time when someone has a problem, well, you don't understand, you're going through that because it's God's will. No, it isn't. Okay? No, it isn't. It isn't God's will that everybody in the world gets cancer. That is not God's will. It is not God's will that a 7-year-old gets the flu and dies. And you hear from people all the time, well, if God is so loving, then why does God let bad things happen? You got to understand something, ladies and gentlemen. Sickness and death and all of these problems and all of these issues, they're not God's will. But what God will do is take what Satan is doing to you and turn it to the good. And that's what he wants to do. But so many times what we want to do is say, God, you don't love me anymore because you're making me go through this. And he's saying, don't you understand? I'm trying to help you through this. As I shared with you a couple of weeks ago, I'm sitting there talking with a daughter and a son who just lost their mother. And then I turn around in less than 12 hours and I'm getting a call that their aunt had died. And so I said, well, it must have been God's will. No, it wasn't. No, it isn't. God doesn't stand up there and say, let's see how many people in this family I can kill today. Is that really what we think of God? That he is so hard? No, he isn't. He's a loving God. What he's saying is, someone dies, yes, but help me love you through it. With the pain and the agony and all of the problems and issues that you're facing, let me help you through it. Because if you try to do it on your own, you ain't going to get through it. It's going to keep beating you down and beating you down and beating you down. I don't know if you've ever run into somebody, but you can read it in the newspaper a lot, where a couple has been married for 50, 60 years. One of them is really struggling to live. And they're taking care of them and taking care of them and taking care of them. And finally, the one that they were taking care of dies. And all of a sudden, there is 60, 65 years, 50 years, whatever. And they come to the point, I can't live without him. And they die. They give up on living. Because a lot of times, why? Because we try to get through the issue and the problem on our own. And we can't. We can't. It doesn't work that way. You see, God built us, ladies and gentlemen, to have a relationship with him and to depend on him in the ways that he wants us to be. Now, could God step in every crisis and stop it? Absolutely. He could do that. But Romans 8:28 says, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him. Ladies and gentlemen, the only way it's going to work is if you love him. Then it will come to the good. But you got to understand something here. Who is this promise to? This promise is not to everybody. Remember, I gave you a series of sermons, 10 things that people say that are not found in the Bible. One of them is all things work out together, or God will work all things out for the good. That's not what it says. God is not working everything out for the good for everybody. God is only working things out to the good for those who love him. What does that mean? That means that you and I as Christians, we've got God on our side. If you don't have God on your side, guess what's happening? You're working your own issues out. You're working your own problems out. You may say, well, I got you, Pastor Chuck. I can't work out your issues. I can't even work out mine. You know? Now God, we learned today that yes, God helps fix us so that we can share with other people to help fix their problem, but only to share with them how we got through this. And how we got through this, we never ever say, well, let me tell you what I did. Because I'm going to tell you something, what you did worked for you, but honey, it ain't working for me because I ain't you. Thank God. And you ain't me. Praise the Lord. We are all separate individuals. But how do we all get through it? The same way. Through God. And through him alone. What we need to understand is the things that are beyond our control, ladies and gentlemen, they are not beyond God's control. He still has a handle on it. No matter where you're going and no matter what's happening, he's still got it. Now, what we also, the other clip that I was going to show you was about Sam. And what happened was Sam is married and his wife's name is Deborah. And what happened was Deborah helped Sam to realize that God had not brought Mac into Sam's life as much as God had brought Sam into Mac's life. There are times, ladies and gentlemen, that people are brought into our lives that seem abrasive. And you think, God, why in the world did you bring them into my life? Did you ever realize that maybe God brought you into theirs? I mean, think about it for a minute. How many of you all married somebody that is exactly like you? No. You married somebody that probably in a lot of ways is absolutely the opposite, right? One of you is laid back, and the other man is compulsive and can hit the anger button in a moment, right? One of you is very outgoing, and the other of you is, how are you doing today? Honey, tell him how I'm doing. What's your name? Tell him my name. Introduce me, would you? There are some of you that like chocolate, some of you that might not. I don't know how, but there are some people that don't. You know? And sometimes we look at that and we think, God, why did you bring that person into my life? Why, God, did you bring us together? My wife gets very upset easily, okay? She gets frustrated. Right now, I mean, honest, it's the pit sometimes. Because she goes to move. Oh man, I hurt. I can't do this anymore. And it's like, but I got to get you up and get you moving. Oh, but I don't want to move. No, you don't understand. I got to get you up moving. Now, let me say this to you. It is very easy, as much as you love somebody, and when they're acting that way, then you say, then just stink and lay there. Right? It's okay. But the reason I say that is this. Honestly, if I got irritated with that type, you know, of a personality or whatever, honey, we would be at each other's throat all the time. We balance each other out. There are times that I'm laid back and she says, hold on a minute, you need to be concerned about this. And I do need to be concerned about it, okay? Not worried, but concerned, okay? And sometimes you need to understand that the reason that God brings us all into each other's lives is so that we can learn from one another. And even though you may have the most stinkingest, rottenest attitude, and I really don't want to be around you, God placed you here in this congregation and I love you. But what you need to find out is God is really trying to teach us a lot of things. And some of the things when He's bringing people into our lives is He's trying to teach us grace, sometimes forgiveness, sometimes true friendship. You see, I've had a lot of people that I thought were my friends. And then all of a sudden something happens and they're out of your life. They never call you. They never write you. They see you somewhere and sometimes they'll walk away. You know, and you wonder, really? This is friendship? And sometimes He brings people in our lives because of showing compassion. I mean, I was watching a show last night that I watch, and it's every once in a while I just turn it off because it goes too far, some things. But there's a guy who was in Iraq, and when he was in Iraq, he actually stepped on an IED. And it actually blew off both of his legs, and it also messed up his arm. And he was laying there, and the only feeling that he had was in one arm and in the torso of his body. And they were asking him, you know, have you ever really had a bad day in your life? And he says, yeah, only one. Yeah. Only one. And I think about, wow, you know, the attitude that he had. Well, they built him legs, and the legs that he has is kind of like the Blade Runner. And you want to know why? Last year, he ran a 26-mile marathon, I believe, every day, across the United States. He ran 50 of them, I'm sorry. He ran one in every state. And then also in Europe, he ran one to raise money for others who have the same issues and the same problems to the Wounded Warrior Project. The guy goes around the country speaking and sharing. You see, he could have given up on life and said, I hate those people over there that did this to me, but he doesn't. He says he wants to teach them that there's a better way of life. He wants to say, you know what, I forgive you for what happened to me, because it's changed me into someone that I was never going to be until that happened. That's where you understand that God works all things to the good for those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose, not always the way we want it. I want to finish with this illustration because many of you all know a lady by the name of Gilda Radner. I don't always agree with her philosophy and everything, but she wrote a book a long time ago before she got into the political stuff. And she wrote a book, it's called It's Always Something. And in there she tells a story. And here's the story. She said, when I was little, my cousin had a dog. It was just a mutt. The dog was pregnant. And she said, I don't know how long that dogs are pregnant, but she was due to have her babies in about a week. She was out in the yard one day and got in the way of the lawnmower, and her two hind legs got cut off. They rushed her to the vet and he said, I can sew her up, or you can put her to sleep if you want, but the puppies are okay. She'll be able to have the puppies. Well, my cousin said to keep her alive. So the vet sewed up her backside with no legs. And over the next week, the dog learned to walk. She didn't spend any time worrying. She just learned to walk by taking 2 steps in front, then flipping up her backside underneath her and pushing forward. Then she would take 2 steps in front, flip forward her backside again. When she gave birth to 6 little puppies, all of them in perfect health. She nursed them, she weaned them. And when they learned to walk, they all walked just like she did. Taking 2 steps in front, then flipping up onto their backside and pushing forward instead of using their legs. They asked the question, why did the puppies learn to walk that way? Because children are great imitators of their parents. You see, things are caught, not taught. Proverbs says this, or the righteous man leads a blameless life. Blessed are his children after him. Let me say this to you. Maybe your kids are grown. And maybe you've got grandchildren. And maybe in prior time of your life, you didn't handle things too well. And you're watching your kids now, and you're thinking, boy, did I really mess that one up. They really did imitate me, didn't they? I wish I could go back and, you know, this is why, may I say this to you? So many times we make mistakes with our kids in teaching them a lot of times. And we wish we could go back and change it, because as we've grown in life, our attitudes and everything, we've kind of chilled. Our patience is a little bit longer. And we wish we could go back and relive those, and we can't. But what we can do is make sure our children and our grandchildren learn. You see, Because as grandparents, our raising of children has never stopped. It has never ceased. You see, because children are going to be imitators, and they're going to catch it. You can tell your children all you want about what's going to happen to them if they stay out too late. And guess what they're going to do? They're going to stay out too late. And maybe nothing ever will happen, but there's the possibility. You see, because our children are watching us. Proverbs says, the righteous man leads a blameless life. Blessed are his children after him. But let me say this to you. Maybe you never did have children. And maybe right now you don't think that you have any. But can I share a little story with y'all? If you're in this church, you've got a bunch. And they're watching you. They're watching to see what you do. They're watching you to see if what you say to them measures up with what you're living. It's easy to tell somebody something. But can I say this to you? We are a visual person. You can tell me a lot of things over and over and over again. But if you can show me, like for instance, teaching a child how to ride a bike. How many times did you have to get on that bike to show them how to pedal? How many times did you fall off? That's why we had our children when we were young. Because if we're grandparents trying to teach our grandchildren how to ride a bike, we're probably going to break something. Our balance is just not the same. We're carrying a little bit more on this side or this side. But there are people out in this world, ladies and gentlemen, that are watching you. And they're seeing how you handle problems. How do you handle issues? And you're going to realize, wow, did I blow that one? The last time, what did you do when somebody cut you off in traffic? Or somebody came flying up behind you? And rear-end you. And you got out wanting to rear-end them. You see, we need to understand lessons from grace. And we need to teach those lessons to those we come in contact with. Let's stand for the invitation, would you?
Hello, this is Pastor Chuck Cotton from Calvary Baptist Church. First of all, I'd like to say thank you very much for taking the time out to either listen to our sermon or to watch it on video. We are grateful that you've actually taken the time and hope and pray that it has been a blessing to you as it was to us as we delivered it to our congregation. We ask if you have any questions whatsoever that you email us at pastorchuck@calvarybaptistmiddletown.org, or you could come in and give us a phone call, if you would please, at area code 513-423-7251. I'd like to take this opportunity to also invite you to come to our church and visit us, if you would please. We actually have small groups on Sunday morning starting at 9:30, with our morning worship following at 10:45. Prior to our morning small groups, we also provide donuts with coffee, milk, orange juice, a time for fellowship, get to know each other, have a good time before we actually break out into our small groups for Sunday. Our worship services are uplifting, they're fast moving, and everything in our service is just a fast pace. But we do take time every once in a while to slow down as we feel the Holy Spirit moving, and we never want to hinder it in any way. We also have on Sunday evening, during the school year, we have Awana, and Awana starts with the Puggles, actually from age 2 all the way up through high school. And during that period of time, We also have a worship service. Both of these start at 6 o'clock and end at 7:30. Our Wednesday night, we have a Bible study, which starts at 7. We generally finish about 8:15. We would love for you to come and visit with us. Don't have to dress up. Just come as you are, because to us, it doesn't matter. You're a child of God, a creation of His, and so to us, you're important to everything that we do. Our motto here is building the kingdom one life at a time, and we hope that we have a chance to visit with you, get to know you as you get to know us. So thank you, and may God bless you.